So it's been a few days since I've had a video up on the channel talking about what's gone on in the world of hockey because it's a constantly evolving situation. Free agency being open, I wanted to give it a couple of days to really have a lot to talk about, hopefully a lot to talk about with every single team in the league. So in this video, we're going to talk about the first half of the league. I'll probably cut it around Minnesota or Montreal. And then tomorrow we'll talk about the second half of the league and what they've done so far. If anything happens before that second video comes out with one of those first 15, 16 teams, I'll make sure to mention it tomorrow. So let's get down to business. We have a lot to talk about. First things first, or first teams first, first and foremost, the Anaheim Ducks. Now, admittedly, here, we'll stay here. They haven't done a ton. Podorowski, Lettieri, Walensky, Galad, who's signing his ELC, all depth for the moment. The big thing here for the Ducks, of course, Derek Grant and Kevin Shattenkirk. Now, again, a shout out to JFresh Hockey, just allowing me to use as much as I care to use off of his Patreon. Again, $5 on Patreon gets you a crap load of information from him. Highly recommend checking him out. For those of you that already have and have said, hey, Tukey sent me, he is very, very appreciative. So thank you guys for that. But a look at Derek Grant. I mean, he's an elite penalty killer. The good thing is, you know, in terms of the amount that they're giving him, they're only giving him $1.5 million, so it's fine. It's a pretty good deal for a bottom six guy, ideally a fourth line guy. Then we look at Kevin Shattenkirk, who of course a few seasons ago looked cooked. He looked done. Has had one hell of a bounce back now over the past 2 seasons. Takes the risk, goes to Tampa, wins the cup, and now gets a decent little deal. Again, the market value had him at about under $5 million. He gets 3.9 for the next 3 years. This is a great deal for the Ducks. And then in terms of trades, the big thing, of course, is that they moved on from Erik Goodbranson. So that brings us to what their depth chart's looking like right now. And again, don't shoot the messenger if you disagree with what Cap Friendly has here. That's all well and good. I'm just going off of what they have. But if you look at this Ducks team, I don't hate the forward core. Obviously, it's very young with Terry, Steele, Jones, even Sonny Milano's only 24, Danton Heinen at 25. It's a pretty young team at this stage. Are they good enough to make the playoffs at that forward core? I don't know, but I don't hate what the Ducks have going on. And then defensively, Lindholm, Manson. I mean, you could, there are some people who don't really like Josh Manson, but I look at that defense core as well, and I don't hate it. I don't know how I feel about Anthony Stolarz as the backup goalie. I mean, time will tell there. I mean, you look at some numbers recently. I mean, he did pretty damn well in the AHL. Only played 1 game in the NHL this past season. So we'll see. He had some injury trouble, though, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll see if he can bounce back. So far, I mean, you haven't had major moves, I would say. He didn't go for one of the top dogs in free agency. But I really like what the Anaheim Ducks have going on at this stage. So I don't know if I want to hand out letter grades or not, but just good job. Good job, Anaheim. Arizona, you've signed John Hayden, Tyler Pitlick, Jordan Gross, Dryden Hunt, and Johan Larsson. I'm not, God, do I want to sit here and get into all the different stats with these guys? I don't know if I necessarily do. Screw it. Screw it. Let's at least, I'm trying to find a positive for Arizona. I'm trying, okay? And the problem is, obviously, they're not the biggest names in the world. There have been no trades. It's a little bit rough for the Coyotes. I mean, especially, too, Taylor Hall walks. We look at the team as it stands. In theory, I don't hate it. Obviously, the idea of having Lawson Krause, at least name value-wise, the idea of having Lawson Krause as a top-line winger is scary. I'm intrigued to see here how far we have to scroll to find Lawson Krause's numbers. Yeah, that's what I thought. Arizona, it's going to be interesting. Obviously, you need Phil Kessel to bounce back. You talk about whether or not the Coyotes are taking a little bit of a step back. I mean, they held on to Oliver Ekman-Larsson. He's not a Bruin. He's not a Canuck. But I don't know what to expect from this team. I don't hate the defense core as it stands. I don't hate the goaltending tandem, although we don't know if Ronta will be able to stay healthy, of course. But, man, there is just not that much offensive firepower up front. I mean, you look at the bottom 6. I mean, Schmaltz and Garland, sure, but something's missing from the Yotes, and the problem is they thought they picked it up last year by getting Taylor Hall and Phil Kessel, and then it still just didn't quite come together. So, interesting times here for the Coyotes. Again, flat out, might Dryden Hunt, Johan Larsson be a little bit better? Sure. I know I've looked at Tyler Pitlick's numbers recently. That's not a major addition. I mean, obviously, Johan Larsson coming over from Buffalo. I mean, 18 points in 62 games. I don't know what the numbers look like for him. And Dryden Hunt only played 21 games for the Cats last year. So, yeah, it's not looking all that optimistic if you are a member, or a fan, I should say, of the Arizona Coyotes. Then we get to the Boston Bruins. They've signed Craig Smith. Kevin Miller's back after missing a decent portion of the last 2 seasons. Craig Smith is it, and they've lost Torrey Krug. I will tell you this. Craig Smith is one hell of a player, right? He is. Craig Smith is a really, really damn good player. Underrated just how good his numbers happen to be. I mean, I really, really like this pickup for the Bruins. But then you look at the projected depth chart. It just feels like something, the top 6 options missing, right? I mean, the top line's going to stay the same. In an ideal world, you would have brought in maybe a Taylor Hall. A Mike Hoffman or an Evgeny Dadonov are still available now that Tyler Toffoli was signed today by Montreal of all teams. In an ideal world, you get Jake DeBrusk down to that third pairing because DeBrusk is much better defensively than he is offensively. And then you have an elite third line of DeBrusk, Coyle, Smith, which just mwah. But I don't see that happening at this point. And I really don't like the idea of Nick Ritchie being on this team. I really don't. Defensively, we don't know if Chara's coming back yet. He probably will. But with the loss of Krug, Grizzlick McAvoy, which, okay. Lozon Carlo, and then John Moore Clifton. It's not, that defense is looking weak. And I don't really know. Alex Pietrangelo, at the time of recording, has just signed with the Vegas Golden Knights. I don't really know who they're going to be looking at getting here. So for the Bruins this upcoming season, it's either that youth steps up, or that the blue line for the Bruins could be in a really, really bad spot. So again, for the Ducks, pretty good. For the Coyotes, and for the Bruins, I like Craig Smith, but there are some glaring weaknesses on the team at this point in time. And speaking of Taylor Hall, we just talked about him a minute ago. Buffalo Sabres, obviously they moved Marcus Johansson last month. But we look now at what they've done in the past few days. Re-signing Zemgus Girgensons, sure. You're paying him way too much money from what I recall his numbers being. Now that he's getting paid $2.2 million. Let's take a look. Where are you, old Zemgus? Zemgus? You're going to be right at the end, aren't you? You're going to be right at the end. Come on, Girgensons. Where are you at, buddy? Sapoko, Simmons, Girgensons. They're overpaying him. I mean, if you're the Sabres, you got to pay some people to get up to the cap floor, in theory. But, yeah, not great. Toby Reeder, not great. Cody Eakin, I mean, bottom 6. Like, right here, for the most part, all of that, it's just, okay, depth. From Girgensons to Eakin, sure, why not? You're not spending that much. I mean, Cody Eakin at $2 million is intriguing to me. They bring back Brandon Montour for almost $4 million, which, to look at his numbers, overall, Montour at that particular price, how do I keep getting players that are right at the end? Actually, he doesn't have the numbers for Montour. I don't know how good Montour is. So fair enough. I'd say that's worth it, though, given what they gave up to get him for the first place in Anaheim. The big news, obviously, is Taylor Hall. I don't need to bring up Taylor Hall's numbers. We all know Taylor Hall's good. It's been a bit of a downswing since his MVP caliber season, his MVP season. Obviously, it was shocking to see Taylor Hall sign with Buffalo. It does make a lot of sense, though, in theory. 1-year deal, you're getting $8 million, and then you go ahead and, either get traded or really land a term that no team was apparently going to give you. You get to play with Eichel and Reinhart. That's going to be a very dangerous line. I like the second line a lot. We'll see how slow Eric Stahl is, but next to Jeff Skinner, he's going to look even slower. So who's to say? It's the bottom 6 right now for the Sabres that, there's some concerns there. But the top 6 isn't that bad. Defensively, it's not that bad either. I mean, the big question now is Hutton and Ullmark. Do I have faith in Ullmark? Yeah. Hutton? No. So for Buffalo, are you going to be bottom feeders this season? Probably not. So far, so good in free agency, though. Again, it's always tough to predict who's going to be at the very bottom of the standings, but overall, it's tough to hate what Buffalo's doing, getting the surprise signing of Taylor Hall. Calgary. The Calgary Canucks, which, as I learned, are actually a real junior team, so there you go. Ronaldo, Robinson, Fraze, Petrovic, Domingue, The big talking points, Markstrom and Tanev, obviously. And I talked about this, and I'll talk about it again for the Canucks. I personally would not have signed Braden Holtby. I would have kept Markstrom. I know Markstrom wanted the term. I think you just give Markstrom the term, short term, and, granted, if the no movement clause, maybe he wouldn't be available to be there for Seattle, but I, bottom line, would have much rather paid Markstrom instead of paying Braden Holtby. Instead, he is now a member of the Calgary Flames, and for pretty much bang on the value that you think he'd get, 6x6. Obviously, the term was a big part of it at 30 years old, but for Calgary, it's a pretty damn big improvement. I do like the tandem here, and we'll go take a look at Big Save Dave's numbers. But obviously, you have Cam Talbot leave and go to Minnesota. We'll talk about that later. But now you have two quality starters in Rittich and Markstrom. I mean, it's tough to say. Now, Rittich really fell off again. That's an interesting curve. We'll see how he does. But in theory, you have two quality goaltenders to build upon. And then obviously, you end up adding Chris Tanev as well. I got to be honest, though, the Tanev signing scares me a lot. He's not what he used to be. The injury concerns are obviously there. You're giving this man $4.5 million for the next 4 years. I don't know, Calgary. I don't know. And now we take a look, of course, at the depth chart. Although in terms of trades, I don't think Calgary, they haven't done anything since the draft. You look at the depth chart now. Top line, still solid. Obviously, there's some questions over Goodrow, I'd say. Kachuk, Bacco, Mangiapane, okay. Lucic, Benetube did very well in the playoffs, and they played. Godin, Ryan, and Ronaldo, sure. But defensively, Giordano Anderson, Hannafin, Tanev, Sheelington, Petrovic. Calgary, I don't think I can give a passing grade for this. I really don't. There's a lot of concerns for the Flames, and I don't think, go figure, talking about, where there's smoke, there's fire. There's been so many concerns now for the Flames, especially after another postseason loss. I don't think this is going to help, really start to help that smoke dissipate. It's only going to be a hotter seat. So many puns. It's going to be an interesting situation in Calgary is the point. Carolina have not done much. Jesper Fast and Joakim Ryan, at least in terms of what's happened in free agency so far. Draft wise, they did pretty well. Let's be honest. For Fast and Ryan, again, you're not going to be looking at the most. Actually, Joakim Ryan was on the Kings this past year, not the Sharks. I always forget that. You're not going to be looking at the most ridiculously high value players in the world. Jesper Fast for a bottom six option, sure. He got second line ice time though previously, but he's making $2 million for the next 3 years. Decent depth signing for the Hurricanes, and then looking at what we have for one Joakim Ryan. It's tough to say he's a bad third pairing defenseman, and if anything, he's being signed as a depth defenseman for Carolina, which is great news for them. So that brings you to their depth chart, and obviously, that top line is solid, the top six is solid, the third line is solid, the forward core is great, and then defensively, if everyone can stay healthy, it's pretty damn good too. Again, Hamilton-Slavin might be the best defensive pairing in the league. The big question, though, is goaltending, which has not been addressed, and if we take a look at some certain numbers here for this tandem, there's a reason why it was rumored that they were going to be in for certain people. Now, James Reimer, 32 years old, but solid. Mrazek solid as well. But, it's interesting. It's interesting, I would say. That, for me at least, because you look at the numbers and it's like, oh, okay, they're solid. They're decent. Yet the rumors were out there that Carolina was going to go after goaltending. So, is it a trust issue? What is it? Just something seems off. Maybe it's just the fan base being a little bit antsy to see some sort of change. But the numbers behind Mrazek and Reimer, they're solid. So you could argue they're being boosted up by defense, but hey, whatever. The numbers are what they are. So for Carolina, I mean, you didn't have to do much, but the 2 moves that they've made, I like quite a bit. As I just keep dropping this. Damn, I'm just going to put it down. The Chicago Blackhawks. This has been interesting. Signings-wise, they bring back Malcolm Subban. Makes sense. He's decent. He's decent. He doesn't have the biggest... I guess sample size in goal. He might actually still show up for Vegas. Yeah, I think he is still going to show up for Vegas, potentially. Or if not, then the card just isn't there. But I can promise you, numbers are decent. Yeah, they're not going to show up. Point being, decent doesn't necessarily mean you want Malcolm Subban to be a part of your tandem, right? I mean, yeah, the numbers aren't necessarily that great. Okay, I'm trying to be nice because Malcolm Subban was a former Bruins pick. I hate this move for Chicago. I do. The good thing is they're not paying him that much. They paid Dominik Kubalik, which is great. And then the big news, of course, is that they've acquired Nikita Zadorov and Anton Lindholm for Brandon Saad and Dennis Gilbert. And to take a look at this, right? Let's take a look again. Let's go inside baseball here. The big talking point for Chicago is that, Kane and Taves aren't happy because Saad's gone again. Brandon Saad's not good. He's not. Not for the amount of money he was getting paid, not for the role you were playing him in. He can contribute as a third-line option, especially on the PK. Like, he's a good penalty killer, but defensively himself, like, the numbers aren't that great. Obviously, now for Colorado, we know why they wanted to make this move and free up a spot on the back end, and it's worked out tremendously. Zadorov's a decent third-pairing defenseman. I mean, bottom line for Chicago, you pick up a third-pairing defenseman and a depth defenseman with NHL experience in exchange for getting rid of Brandon Saad. I don't agree. Like, for me, with Chicago, blow it up. Blow it up. You're not competitive enough. Now is the right time to get something for Kane and Taves. And obviously, they're not going to be happy to see, like, we traded one of our friends and this makes us worse. Like, it's just time to say, okay, let's don't hold on to the old era too long because it's going to screw you up. It's going to screw you up if you hold on to that core for too long. They've also added Matthias Janmark and Lucas Wallmark. And to take a look at these numbers, I'm pretty sure Wallmark ended up in Florida from Carolina. I don't know if his numbers will be here or on Carolina. They should be here. Mr. Wallmark, there you are. Yeah. Good defensively. But you look at the past 3 seasons, this was really his first decent season. They signed him for under $1 million, which is okay. And then we look at one Matthias Janmark. It's weird how the loading times on these are a little bit different depending on the player. Or depending on the team, apparently. But looking at Matthias Janmark, I mean... yeah, I'll take Matthias Janmark on my team, especially, if they didn't have to overpay him, and they got him on a pretty damn good deal. So I like that for Chicago. You look at the depth chart, and again, this is where it gets kind of interesting here. I want to close that tab. Kubalik, Taves, Kane, good. DeBrincat, Doc, Nylander, pretty solid. Janmark, Strome, Carpenter, sure. Peary, Walmart, Kampf, okay. But then Keith Murphy. Keith isn't what he used to be. Murphy's solid as a defenseman. DeHaan has his injury concerns, of course, with Boqvist. Carlson with Zadorov. And then Delia with Subban. It's just not going to happen. Of course you trade Brandon Saad. You need to keep picking apart this team. Keep going. You're not done with the process. You're not a few pieces away from this team being a cup contender again. There's no way. You got absolutely spanked by Vegas, and Vegas just added Alex Pietrangelo. You're not close. Hey, I might end up being wrong, but so far for Chicago, I mean, again, I don't mind Wallmark and Janmark. You get rid of, you get rid of Saad. Not that Zadorov's much better. I don't know. If I'm a Hawks fan, I'm just begging for them to blow it up. And then we get to Colorado. Another reason why they are not particularly close, right? Another reason why they're not particularly close. Colorado so far. Sheldon Dries, Mika Salamaki, Kiefer Sherwood, Mike Vecchione, Jason Magna, all depth options. The big news is that they re-signed Burakovsky, Nichushkin, and Graves. And yeah, they did very, very well in doing that. Andre Burakovsky. I mean, again, for a third liner who can contribute offense, $4.9 million. It's about the most that you'd want to pay him, but they end up locking him down. We move on to... I wish there was like a drop-down menu for the names. That'd be the only thing that can make this Patreon even better. You move on to Valeri Nichushkin. And everybody knows that Valeri Nichushkin, at least you don't know, you should know, was one of the best defensive forwards in the league this past season. Ridiculous. And to get him for $2.5 million is a steal and a half. Again, you draft someone as highly drafted as he was by the Dallas Stars, and you think, offensive dynamo. Not necessarily. He's good offensively, but yeah, Valeri Nichushkin, in terms of defensive presence, is absolutely ridiculous. And then there's Ryan Graves, who's really interesting. Of course, he comes over from the Rangers, and it's like, okay, he's never going to make it. And then he gets a chance on the third pair for the Avs, and yeah, looked like a legitimate top four defenseman. They signed him for $3.1 million. And then today, aside from the Saad trade, which again, they move a defenseman, which is fine. They pick up Saad, which is okay. They move AJ Greer and Kyle Burroughs. I keep dropping stuff. What are you going to do? Then today, 2 second-round picks for Devon Toews. Somebody has to stop Joe Sakic. For the love of God, somebody stop Joe Sakic. The Avs just added a player of this caliber. It's incredibly frustrating. Now, only a 2-year sample size, but still. I mean, come on. It's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous that the Avs were just able to add a player like this. So now you look at the depth chart. Landeskog, McKinnon, Rantanen, Jesus. Saad, Burakovsky, and Kadri, solid. Jost, Comfort, Donskoy, solid. Belmar, Calvert, Nichushkin, solid. And then this defense, Graves, Makar, Gerard, Timmins, Taves, and Cole. I mean, not to mention Eric Johnson, who's currently listed as injured. You don't know if Bowen Byram will step up early. I mean, shit, and if their goaltending can stay healthy, Colorado is going to be an even bigger wagon than they were this past season. Some teams have all the luck. We get to Columbus, who have had an interesting little offseason so far. Obviously, the Max Domi deal we've talked about. Kavlenieks is fine. Bayreuth or depth. The big pickup is Mikko Koivu, who's still really good defensively at his age. The big thing for them has been the trading and reworking to probably bring in a big-time free agent, although they haven't really managed to do that. But they moved Marcus Nudivara's contract and Ryan Murray's. Nudivara, decent third-pairing defenseman. Ryan Murray's really goddamn good, but he's also really injury-prone. So that leaves the Blue Jackets right now looking like this, potentially. Foodie Dubois, Bjorkstrand, pretty good. Foligno Domi Atkinson, pretty good. The forward core in general, pretty good. I mean, we'll see what Mikhail Grigorenko brings now that he's coming back over to the NHL. Defensively, Werenski Jones, solid. Gavrikov, Savard, Harrington, Kukin, okay. The goaltending, I mean, they're paying them both. We'll see if the consistency is there. It's solid. But really, it did look like with the Blue Jackets, with that $13 million in space, not only were they going to look to, of course, re-sign Pierre-Luc Dubois, who's going to get paid, but potentially make a splash in free agency, which they haven't quite done yet. So it's okay for Columbus. It's not a gigantic... it's not on either end of the spectrum. It's not a gigantic win. It's not a gigantic loss. We get to Dallas. They haven't really done much. Khudobin, Faksa, L'Esperance brought back. They signed Mark Pysyk, who's okay. We'll see if he plays D or forward for them. Just not really much to talk about with the Dallas Stars and what they've done so far this offseason, which might end up being a little bit frustrating for Stars fans, of course, falling just 2 wins short of winning a Stanley Cup. They still have to sign Gurionov and Hintz, but looking at their depth chart, I mean, the top 6... We'll see if Kiviranta, I love the guy, but we'll see if Kiviranta kind of pays off in that role. Still looks like that's a lineup that's screaming for a bit more offensive help. Defensively, I mean, you re-signed Andrei Sekera, so that's fine. Goaltending, you bring back Khudobin. I mean, it's tough to say that this team can't necessarily make it right back to where they were, but it is going to be dependent on a lot of role players and some younger guys like Nick Kamano and Hintz continuing to step up. So I don't hate this offseason so far for the Stars, but it hasn't exactly been anything spectacular, I would say. Whereas the Detroit Red Wings, the Yzer plan in full effect right now. They sign Adam Ernie, or re-sign Adam Ernie. Tara Hirose is still there. They bring in Bobby Ryan on a big, hey, prove yourself contract. Barber, Criscola, depth options. Merrill could be decent. Boyle. The big news here, though, is the last three. Greiss, Stetcher, and Nemesnikov. And obviously, we take a look. Here, I'll bring up some numbers for this one. Basically, all three are incredibly, incredibly solid. Nemesnikov, where did you play last year? And I only say this. He did play in Colorado. Because I'm pretty sure in our Ottawa series, we had Nemesnikov on the team. So I couldn't remember if he got dealt to Colorado or not. He did, though. I should have remembered because I think we saw his chart here earlier. Nope, he's not there, actually. Is he going to be listed in Ottawa? He might be. Can we find the Nemesnikov? Can we please find the Nemesnikov? Well, there's Bobby Ryan. Which for $1 million, sure, give him a shot, see what he can do, and see if he can bounce back. But, 33, 34 years old. It's a little bit concerning. It's a bit surprising he didn't do kind of the Patrick Maroon deal of I'm going to go to Tampa and be a role player for dirt cheap. But, hey, what are you going to do? Can't find the one for Nemesnikov. But at the very least, in terms of bringing in Troy Stetcher, a decent second pairing defensive potential here for Stetcher. And then, of course, Thomas Greiss. He's getting up there in age, but pretty good value for money in goal as well. So I like the moves they've made so far. In terms of trading, they haven't done anything beyond what they did in the draft. So then we take a look at this depth chart. Now, obviously, this isn't a team that's going to necessarily be expected to compete, but top line, pretty good. Second line, not bad. Third line, we'll see. Fourth line, we'll see. Defensively, though, is where it's still rough. Nemeth, Biega, Stahl, Stetcher, Cholowski, Merrill. Greiss and Bernier in goal are decent, but obviously for Detroit, not in win-now mode, taking their time. I don't hate what they've done, though, so far this season. I actually like their moves quite a bit. I also don't think it makes them so good that they're going to screw themselves out of draft picks, which is what you always wonder about when a team like Buffalo ends up signing Taylor Hall. Shout out to this text message. Yeah, it's like, hey, your phone bill's going through. Thanks. Take my money, please. The Edmonton Oilers. Big news, of course. Jesse Puljujarvi's coming back. They re-signed Tyler Ennis. They give Kyle Turris a chance, which, for the money he's getting, that's fine. The big thing, of course, is that they're not paying him $6 million. Griffith, Quine, Forsberg, good depth options. The Mike Smith deal is interesting. I mean, regardless of, what you want to say about numbers, like just for the playoff performance alone, probably would have moved on from Mike Smith. I mean, he's been in terms of the goals saved against, expected, it's been dropping. It hasn't been great. I probably would have moved on. You look at the numbers and you can say, okay, well, it's still not that bad. And it's not, but we all know with Mike Smith, it's funny, he has 2-star out of 5 consistency here. And it's funny because he's consistently inconsistent. So, I don't know. I wouldn't have gone for that. Then they bring in Tyson Barrie, who, is looking for a big bounce-back performance here as well. Now, I still don't think Barrie's as bad as he looked in Toronto. That said, as a pure offensive defenseman, yeah, I mean, it's a bit of an overpayment in theory. We'll see what he can do, especially for the Oilers if Klefbom being injured is still a concern for them. You look at the team, though. I mean, the forward core is solid. I don't hate it. I don't know if they'd play Puljujarvi on the fourth line. Defensively, it's fine. I mean, obviously relying on Bear and Jones to keep stepping up is what it is. Hopefully Klefbom is back for them. No idea how long he's going to be out for right now. Can you trust Koskinen and Smith in goal is a pretty big question. So the Oilers probably still will be competing for a playoff spot this upcoming season, but we'll see whether or not it works out for them long term. Florida Panthers, Lomberg, probably a depth option, but they bring in Radko Gudas, decent third pairing guy. Carter Verhaeghe, who's going to, I feel like he should be like 32, not 25. I'm not saying the site's wrong, but he's just been around forever. Someone who, again, is going to try to consistently crack an NHL lineup. Hinostroza's okay for a bottom 6 option. And then Wemberg, after being bought out by Columbus, is a decent pickup for them for that price as he tries to rebuild. And then for Florida as well, of course, the Nudivara addition. So I really like what the Panthers have done so far. I really do. I mean, that top line, obviously they've already brought in Patrick Hornqvist. Despite being 33 years old, Hornqvist is still really good. I actually wouldn't have given him up if I was Pittsburgh. You know, we'll see if Noel Acciari can continue to do what he did last year. Vetrano and Conley are fine. This is banking on Tippett and Lundell being in the lineup. Henry Bolby as well, who was an NCAA signing. We'll see about that forward core. That's a lot of inexperienced and young players to try and trust. Then defensively, we don't really know the future of Mackenzie Weegar, who's not signed, but Ekblad, Yandel, Strawman, and Ivar Gudis. It's okay. It's okay. Obviously, the Cats aren't done with their moves just yet. Bobrovsky, you have no choice but to trust. And Chris Drieger was really goddamn good last year and jumped Sam Montembeault in terms of being used. And Montembeault was absolutely horrific. Bob was okay, but obviously not someone you want to pay $10 million to. So I don't know as it stands. I probably wouldn't have the Panthers as a playoff team, but I think they are making some very, very smart decisions that will help the team over the next few seasons. We get to LA, no major moves. They re-sign Matt Luff and AC Mott, and they bring in Mark Alt and Troy Grosnick. And in terms of trades, nothing outside of the draft. So I'm not really sure what the LA Kings are doing here. That said, in terms of having a great prospect pool, they certainly have one. So, you know, you look here at this, I mean, Velarde potentially being in the lineup, Anderson Dolan as well. A lot of young players. Obviously, Carter, Brown, and Kopitar are still there. But at this stage for LA, I guess you could just be like, well, why bring somebody in? Let's just stay the course here. So I don't hate the moves or the lack of moves necessarily. They brought in Oli Mata, which, you know, we'll see how that works out. I do like Roy and Walker. I think it's Matt Roy. So overall, the Kings aren't in a bad spot. You know, real lack of moves. Probably won't be that good this year. But another team that can just kind of stay the course, and hopefully they end up where they want to be. That brings us to Minnesota, which is actually the last team I'm going to cover here. And looking at Minnesota, you re-signed Sturm and Suchi before the draft. Bartkowski, Rao, Mermis, Cramarosa, Capo Kakinen might be the backup this year, but a lot of depth. You bring back Jordan Greenway. The big move is Cam Talbot, as we talked about. And if you take a look at Cam Talbot's numbers again, I don't know if he's the guy that you want to trust as your starter, but I mean, time will tell. 33 years old, Cam Talbot's had a very interesting NHL career. In terms of trades, nothing since the draft has gone down, but of course they did acquire Nick Bonino actually just right after the draft, and of course moved on from Devin Dubnyk as well. So it's been a very interesting offseason for the Wild. You look at their projected depth chart right now. Marcus Johansson is your top center. I mean, Parise is still useful at times. Fiala's obviously solid. Zuccarello, Eriksson, they brought over Kaprizov, which is nice. Greenway, Bonino, Bjugstad should be a good third line. It's projecting Marco Rossi to be in, which we'll see. And then defensively, I don't know. I don't see Minnesota being anywhere near the playoffs this year, to be honest. They have some decent pieces. Guerin clearly has some sort of plan. But overall, it's going to continue to be an interesting offseason. So with that, I will be back tomorrow, and we will go through the rest. Montreal to Winnipeg. And again, if any other signings or trades happen in between now and that second video being recorded, I'll talk about it if it happened for any of the teams that happened before then. You know the deal. Let me know in the comments what you think. Do I got it right? Do I got it wrong? If I talked about one of your favorite teams, how do you think they've done as well? What would you have wanted them to do? You know the whole deal. Interested by the conversation. Yeah, you know, overall, a lot of some head scratchers, some teams doing well. It's a pretty good mix, as I think you'd expect to see in free agency. And again, the NHL season, in theory, starts up in less than 3 months, which is batshit insane.